Hey everyone, Pugs here with two new reviews for y'all. Today we've got Sleepy Time and Suds, two episodes that share the interesting similarity of SpongeBob dreaming at the beginning of the episode, so that's pretty fun. Like always, just want to stop real quick and say a quick thank you to everyone who's been watching, liking, and commenting. I see all y'all and I appreciate all y'all. That's about it for me, so let's just get right into these reviews. First up for our reviews today, we've got Sleepy Time. This is a fun little episode that's pretty unique compared to other episodes of SpongeBob SquarePants, in my opinion. And I still stand by that, even after watching Dream Hoppers, by the way. The whole dream concept in this episode is super cool, and we don't typically spend much time with the characters sleeping in this show, so I think that's pretty cool. And another cool thing about this episode is that it's the first time, like for real this time, that we see every main character together. Like some real ensemble cast magic for real, even if everyone is solely interacting with SpongeBob and not each other. And yeah, I guess we see every main character by technicality because, like, Mrs. Puff is just a figment of SpongeBob's dream, and we only see Karen for like a second. But I mean, everyone's together, I'm counting it, and that's that on that, okay? Moving on, one of the nice things about having so many different characters in this episode is that we get to explore their personalities and thoughts and desires a bit because of the dream hopping aspect of to this episode. With each dream we see, like, something new is established about a character, or we understand a little more the things that we already know about them. So let me just explain by going through all of these dreams real quick. So with Gary, we learn that he's actually a very educated, well-read snail with a seeming passion for literature. Given that Gary can't talk in a way that we can understand in the show, this comes as a surprise. And I also just really liked this segment because it basically just kind of foreshadows the rest of the episode, where, like, Gary's like, beware your wandering eye, little peripherin, I think he says. So, I don't know, I thought that was pretty cool. And then moving on, so like with Patrick's dream, we can visually see how empty-headed he is. And I love how this was referenced in Battle for Bikini Bottom. I thought that was pretty cool. Anyway, I love how simple his dream is, like just riding on a plastic seahorse with that cool background track. I forget what it's called. It starts with a D, but yeah. It's kind of sweet how little he needs to feel satisfied. For Squidward, his dream is kind of interesting because of how it very clearly takes place in like a different era of like time. Like with this dream, we get to see how much Squidward wants to become famous and respected from playing the clarinet, and also how much he idolizes classical musicians, apparently. With Sandy's dream, we get to see how much of a thrill seeker she is, something we kind of already knew, but wouldn't spend too much time on until pre-hibernation week. All the visual gags we have in this scene were fun as well, and I love the whole like paramedic thing at the end of it. And then, given how little we've seen like Pearl at this point, we kind of learned lots about her personality from her dream, which I also think her dream's kind of like the basis for Bossy Boots. But I don't know, maybe that's just me. Mr. Krabs' dream, like, it's pretty self-explanatory, and I think it also gives us the basis for Clams. Also, we learned that Mr. Krabs apparently had a mustache at some point in time. I think this dream sequence is probably my favorite out of all of them because I think it's the funniest. SpongeBob completely messing up like Mr. Krabs' money fishing is pretty amusing, and I love the ending where Mr. Krabs literally like shoots SpongeBob out of his dream, and like the faces on both Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob when SpongeBob like loses the money, like that was hilarious. I love how like Mr. Krabs' nose is just like a straight line when it's usually like, crooked, I guess. Lastly, for Plankton's dream, we get, stereotypical evil villain behavior with a side of compensation for his short stature. I love how SpongeBob defends Gary in this dream. Like, that was, like, basically 10 wins right there. So, yeah, I guess those are all, like, the dreams that we see other than SpongeBob's own dream. And as you can see, that's quite a few. I think this episode does a great job at showcasing each person's dream without the 11 minutes feeling too busy or crowded, which I think is pretty impressive. Surprisingly, or perhaps not, I think the biggest flaw of this episode is that it's rather dull more than anything. I wouldn't call it boring. It was decently entertaining throughout, but it wasn't super funny. And like Sleepy Time does make up for that though, with all of the character exploration, and and I love how much joy SpongeBob gets in going to everyone's dreams. He's just like really cute in this episode, especially like during his own dream. I also like the ending of this episode where everyone confronts SpongeBob and Patrick cares not even a little bit, and all he wants is a quarter. So yeah. So, like, even if Sleepy Time is not as funny as it could have been, I still really like it for all that it has to offer in other ways. And that's why I'm putting this episode in my great tier, coming in with a score of 8.8 out of 10. Moving right along, we've got Suds. See, I don't know what it is with me and having like the most random episodes be the most nostalgic ones, but this episode gives me lots and lots of nostalgia. Like, watching Suds like brings me right back to childhood within seconds. So like this show in general, I guess, Suds is a comfort for me. And unlike Sleepy Time, I care for this episode not because of its plot, though it is a great plot, but the fact that it's simply hilarious. Like, this episode really just gets me on the floor laughing every time, and I fear that Suds is rather underrated. It's not the funniest episode in the show, of course not, but, like, the jokes do keep on coming, and I love them all. Not to mention, this episode is pretty good at random humor, such as, like, when Sandy walks in on Patrick's newest, quote-unquote treatment for SpongeBob, and it looks like, yeah, I guess Sandy didn't walk in, but, like, when she was knocking at the door. But, yeah. Really just like all of the treatment stuff was pretty funny and random, like the bandage or the peanut butter. And of course, like there's like, don't touch me, I'm sterile, or like, when Patrick psychs SpongeBob out to not wanting to go to the doctor, like the way he dramatizes the most mundane aspects of that, like with reading old magazines, like all of that was just too funny. And also I loved, when Patrick was on the phone with Sandy and he ends up interrupting her Texasism. Oh my god. Okay, so I just thought about this right now, but hear me out. Okay, so for any of y'all that have watched Dragon Ball Super, remember during the Tournament of Power when those fighters from Universe 2 start transforming and like Android 17 just like fires at them while they're transforming? Like, Patrick interrupting Sandy's Texasism feels exactly like that. Probably because it's subverting a very established trope, though I guess in this case, the Texasism trope hadn't really been established too deeply yet, but like we know that Sandy talks like that. So it just feels like we're breaking a rule here. So yeah, I just thought of that. That was a whole tangent. Oops. Y'all should know those are the name of the game by now though, so I don't really feel too bad. Anyway, another strength of this episode is like the characters. Like the ones who make major appearances are just great here at some of their best. SpongeBob is absolutely adorable here, which is a staple of season 1 at this point, but I still feel the need to point it out anyway. And he's cute, even if I do feel bad for the little guy during the whole thing. SpongeBob just kind of being in the middle of Patrick and Sandy, you know, literally at the end, is just a great dynamic for the three of them. We don't typically see Patrick and Sandy at direct odds like this, I don't think. So that was interesting to see here. Speaking of Sandy, she was also excellent in Suds. Her no-nonsense attitude is like the perfect foil to Patrick's delusional shenanigans, and I love how determined she is to make sure SpongeBob gets some like proper care. And her Texasisms were just great in this episode, as I kind of touched on before. Patrick's also great in this episode. I mentioned his whole dramatic retelling of what happens at the doctor, which I thought was great, but he's got some other great moments too, like at the very end of the episode when Patrick gets his comeuppance. I thought that was hilarious. Poor guy was like being rubbed into like literal cacti, though I think he got the point. But sorry, that was so bad. I can't help myself. Anyway, Suds is also a great example of how to have characters make things worse while trying to help, like Patrick does here, without those characters being annoying or infuriating or malicious about it. Yeah, stuck in the ringer, I'm glaring at you right now. Anyway, Suds is a pretty great episode that I've got nothing bad to say about. It's got that season 1 slowness, sure, but as I continue to emphasize, like, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And in fact, it works for these episodes specifically. And either way, I think this episode is pretty funny and has some great interactions between all of our characters. I even like the Mr. Krabs like cameos that we get. And all of this together is why this episode is in my amazing tier, coming in with a score of 9 out of 10. As always, I wanted to share some closing thoughts of mine. I don't know how to explain it, but these are two episodes that just belong together in my head, like Suds and Sleepy Time. I can't think of one without thinking of the other. And maybe it's because of that similarity I mentioned at the beginning of the video, like with both episodes beginning with SpongeBob dreaming. I don't know. Maybe it's because they both start with the letter S. I'm not really sure. But whatever the case is, like these episodes for me are a package deal, like do not separate. And, I like them both, so that works just fine with me. Other than that, I ain't got too much to say about these episodes. I think they're both really underrated, and I feel like Suds especially, I feel like they're forgotten about, which I think is a shame, because I really enjoy both of these episodes, and I wish more people talked about them, so that's too bad, I guess. Yeah, so now I really don't have anything left to say, so I guess I'll just see y'all in the next review.